Welcome to the Chess Angle. This is not your typical chess podcast. If you're an amateur or club-level player, the Chess Angle is for you. Our content is aimed at busy adults who are serious about the game but have limited study time. Featured guests include both amateur and titled players alike. And now, here's your host, Director of the Long Island Chess Club, Neil Bellon.
Welcome everyone to Season 6. Took just a few weeks off there, so not too long of a break. Glad to be back. First, some brief housekeeping and some reminders, since this is our premiere episode. Remember, we're available on all major podcasting apps and also on our website, which may be more convenient if you're on a desktop. You can just go to thechessangle.com. There's no logging in to an app or anything, and the episodes are right there. It's very easy to navigate, very uncluttered. So if you're working, again, on a laptop or a desktop, you can just open up a separate tab, and the website and the episodes are right there. Maybe a more convenient way for you to listen while you're at work or doing other tasks on your computer, because I know that's very common for podcast listeners. Also, be sure to check out our YouTube channel. There is a link in the show notes, or you could just look for the Chess Angle Podcast on YouTube. I know most of you listening are on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, something like that. But if you would consider subscribing to us on YouTube anyway, just to show you support, we would appreciate it. It really helps with visibility and search optimization and promotion. So we would appreciate that. We're also on Twitter, or X as they now call it. I'm still processing that. Excuse me. It feels weird to call it X, but we're on there at the Chess Angle, so you can always tag me. I also post announcements when new episodes are released. So if you're a Twitter person, be sure to follow us. And now that we're 83 episodes in, we do now have a Patreon page for those interested in supporting the show. Before I talk about this, know that I'm going to speak about it now at length because I'm introducing it. Moving forward, there will be a link in the show notes, and I'm just going to mention it tangentially. In other words, don't think that because we now have a Patreon that I'm going to speak about it at length every episode. That's not going to happen. Now, you'll notice I waited on this. I'm from the school of thought that as a content creator, you need to establish your content and show what you're about first and develop an audience, and then think about a support platform such as Patreon. To my amazement, this is just my opinion here. There are podcasts that start a Patreon after just one episode or 5 episodes. I mean, really, you need to present your content first over a period of time before you think about a Patreon. That's just my thought process. And I'm just doing it now, and we're in Season 6. The other thing I don't like as a podcast listener, because I do listen to a number of podcasts. I'm not speaking about just chess podcasts, but podcasts in general. I listen in the car a lot, and you're never going to hear me speak in a way where, like, some creators sound almost beggy. Like, they'll speak about a Patreon or a support platform, and they'll say things like, having a podcast is expensive, so I really need your help. Or, if you want to keep getting the same great content, you really should contribute. Or, my personal favorite, if you want the podcast to continue, I really need your support. That is not at all the tack I'm taking. I'm never going to say that. My whole thing is, it's there for people who are interested. I'm just putting it out there. If you want to check it out, great. If not, that's also great. That being said, our Patreon membership is very inexpensive. It's one tier. I'm deliberately keeping it simple. I thought about this a great deal. There are some perks that you get, which are explained on the site. I believe it's a great value for the price, and it gets better. If I add more perks down the line, those will be included in that same tier without the price increasing. You heard it here. I'm supposed to, quote unquote, supposed to add additional tiers with a higher fee, but I don't want to do that. Basically, with the way I have it structured, I believe you're getting an excellent value. So again, I wanted to simply explain it, put it out there for those who are interested in supporting the show, and that's it. The link is in the show notes for you to check out. I appreciate your consideration. Now, as a reminder, this is important, our main podcast content, everything you hear, all the audio content, including any bonus episodes that I may do, because that's something I want to add, and also the ability to send me questions and topic ideas, all that, all the content, sending in questions, sending in topic suggestions, that will never be behind a paywall. It never has been and never will be. That'll always be free. And that's not going to change. And speaking of supporting the show, I have to say that the podcast is doing very well. Our download numbers are excellent. The reviews are excellent. And that's because of all of you. You guys are awesome. I truly appreciate all the support and positive feedback that I've gotten, and it really means a lot. So now, let's get to the main content for this week's episode. So as most of you know by this point, I'm sure, International Master Jeremy Silman, who is my favorite chess author, my favorite chess teacher, passed away recently after battling an illness for some time apparently. So we mourn his loss, and I wanted to devote an episode to his work and everything he's done for the amateur player. Silman really understood, in my view, that is, he really understood the weaknesses of the amateur player and addressed them better than anyone. I think he really tapped into the erroneous thought processes of amateurs, because we all know the theory and we may know certain endgames and openings and have all the stuff as far as knowledge that we need to know. But if our thought process is erroneous in some way, it's going to hinder our progress. And he really tapped into that. Now, Silman's claim to fame really is his middle game strategy, right? Like you have Pal Benko, his thing was kind of like the end game. For Silman, it was really the middle game. Now, yes, his endgame book, which we'll talk about later, is certainly important, and he offered a lot with the endgame, but I think most would agree that his middle game strategy, and in particular his system of the imbalances, is really what he is known for. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar, he refers to the imbalances as the differences in the position. And it's a method of thinking where you understand what's happening in the position before you make a move. And he talks about knowing what your responsibilities are in the position. For example, you may want to attack or be an attacking player, but the position might not call for it. Or you may want to play in a more slow or subtle way, but the position is calling for you to attack. And he really talks about that. It's not so much what you want to do, but what's happening in the position. And he lists the imbalances in many of his books. Now, The Amateur's Mind and Reassess Your Chess are the two most well-known books that he wrote, probably, and we're going to talk about them in a minute. But I wanted to at least read the list of imbalances and just speak about them briefly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read from pages 2 and 3 of The Amateur's Mind, and then we're going to speak about some of his signature books, and then I want to talk about some of his lessons that are available on chess.com that I'm guessing a lot of people aren't utilizing. And everything I'm speaking about, there will be links in the show description for you to check out. So now let's discuss his list of imbalances. He lists 7 imbalances, and the first one is minor pieces, the interplay between bishops and knights, trying to make one superior to the other. And one of the things he talks about is that many amateurs are completely unaware about differences between the minor pieces and trying to make yours better than your opponent's. The second imbalance is pawn structure, a broad subject that encompasses doubled pawns, isolated pawns, backward pawns, passed pawns, etc. Space is the third one, the annexation of territory on a chessboard. The next one is material, owning pieces of greater value than the opponent's. Number 5 is files and squares. Files, ranks, and diagonals act as pathways for your pieces, while squares act as homes. Whole plans can center around the domination of a file or the creation of a weak square in the enemy camp. The next one is development. A lead in development gives you more force in a specific area of the board. This is a temporary imbalance because the opponent will eventually catch up. And then the last one is initiative, dictating the tempo of a game. This is also a temporary imbalance. So in summary, minor pieces, pawn structure, space, material, files and squares, development, and initiative. And he talks about static versus dynamic imbalances. If it's a dynamic imbalance, it's generally temporary, where if it's static, it's a little more long-lasting. So now I'd like to discuss 4 of his signature books. And again, there are links for all of these in the show notes. Now, the first one, you know what I'm going to say, it's The Amateur's Mind, which I believe is the most important instructional book. Now, you can check out episode 6 of this podcast, which is an entire episode devoted to The Amateur's Mind. So I don't want to get too deep into the weeds now because I already did that. So I linked directly to episode 6 if you want to check it out. But I do want to review just a couple of things about that book. With The Amateur's Mind, Silman wrote down his students' thoughts after giving them a better position. He would give them a position. His student would generally get a position where it was slightly better. And he had them share their thoughts out loud before moving. And he also had them annotate grandmaster games. And what he realized is that they had errors in their thinking patterns that he could never have imagined. And he took all that and he shared it in The Amateur's Mind. And it's very cool to look at what his students were thinking, because you see so many common errors that happen at the amateur level. The thing with this book, with The Amateur's Mind, it's the book that's going to make you realize how much you don't know. Like, it's the kind of book where every page is going to be like, oh my God, I didn't know that. Like, oh wow, I didn't know that. It's almost like reading, like if you read like a really good like Malcolm Gladwell book or something like that, where every page you're like, wow. It's that kind of book. It's that old expression, you don't know what you don't know. And with The Amateur's Mind, I promise you, you're going to see stuff in there that you're going to be like, I didn't even know that, or how did I not know that? That's why that book is so important, because I think it does that better than any other book out there. And I will say that book is good for higher rated players as well. So if you're, say, 1,700, 1,800, even 2,000, maybe even 2,100, I'm pretty sure you're going to get something out of that, because I can tell you personally, I know of at least 2 experts. That is, they were already rated 2,000 when they discovered The Amateur's Mind, and they read it because they heard about it. They both thought it might have been too easy for them, and both of them told me that they got a lot out of it. So even if you're kind of an established club player, let's say you're above 1,600, I promise you're going to get something out of it. And if you're lower rated, you'll certainly get something out of it. And it's probably better to read it early on. You'll have a little bit of an advantage because you'll develop these correct thinking patterns early on. Now, if you're a complete rank beginner, if you're just getting into chess and you're just learning how the pieces move, you're probably not there yet. But as you start to play, if you're maybe, 1,000, 1,200, 1,300, you can definitely start to look at this book, because it'll give you a solid grounding in positional chess and middle game strategy. The next book, which is one of my favorites, not as well known as The Amateur's Mind or something like Reassess Your Chess, which we'll talk about in a minute. The complete book of chess strategy is outstanding. I consider it to be the best all-in-one reference book. It's not really meant to be read cover to cover, though you could. It's the type of thing where if you just need to look something up or check something, maybe there was something in your game you never saw before, you just kind of want to get a quick explanation. That's what this book is for. And I did an episode on this as well. You can check out episode 60, which is all about this book, and I go through it in detail. He goes through every aspect of the game in the complete book of chess strategy. He goes through the opening, the middle game, endgame, and then he has a great section on practical matters. That's what he calls it, where he discusses chess psychology. When I say he starts out by discussing the opening, he has almost a mini encyclopedia of openings where he goes through a variety of openings in alphabetical order. There's about 1 to 3 pages per opening, and it's a great little reference if you don't want to buy like a huge opening manual, like something like Modern Chess Openings or something like that. If you just want like a nice condensed overview of all the mainstream openings and even some of the unconventional openings like the Grob and stuff, that's all in there. Check out this book. Then, of course, with the middle game, he discusses his imbalances. It's kind of a condensed version. And then he also gives you some basic endgame theory, the more important endgame theory like king and pawn versus king, things like that. But the complete book of chess strategy, that's one that you should really have on your shelf. And it's probably the best one and done book out there. The third book I would like to discuss is Reassess Your Chess, the 4th edition. This is basically The Amateur's Mind on like 5 shots of espresso, okay? The Amateur's Mind introduces the imbalances and he speaks about it on a basic level. He gets into the heads of his students, but Reassess Your Chess really, really does a deep dive. Now, he says in the intro that it's for players 1400 to 2100. It's definitely more advanced than the Amateur's Mind. It's not for beginners. Even if you're about maybe 12, 1300, it still might be a little advanced. Now, here's my take. I think for many club players, as far as understanding his system and applying it in your games, the Amateur's Mind is probably all you need for quite some time. And then down the road, I would certainly check out How to Reassess Your Chess. It's a beast of a book. I mean, it's over 600 pages. So it's definitely going to take some time to get through, but it is more advanced. Again, I would read The Amateur's Mind first, absorb that, process that. And as you feel you're getting better understanding his system, then you can take it to the next level by reading Reassess Your Chess. I do not believe Reassess Your Chess should be your first read of Silman. So basically, as far as order, read The Amateur's Mind first. The complete book of chess strategy you can really throw in at any time because that's a reference book. And then after The Amateur's Mind, not immediately after, I would wait for a period of time, then read Reassess Your Chess, where you can take his ideas of the imbalances to a higher level. And again, he gets into the imbalances and analyzing positions in significantly more depth than The Amateur's Mind. Also, there's some great content on chess psychology as well, a lot of which is overlooked. Again, in Reassess Your Chess, the 4th edition, some great things on chess psychology. And in the back, he has some like bonus material, like letters people have written. Fantastic book. But again, it's a thick, heavy book. I mean, you could probably use it as a weapon. It's very, very dense, but some fantastic material in that. So I would definitely check it out when you're ready. The 4th and final book I want to discuss by Silman is Silman's complete Endgame course. Now, it came out in 2007. It's already considered a classic. It's one of the most popular Endgame books, probably the only one you'll need. You could definitely make a valid argument that Silman's Complete Endgame course is the only Endgame book you need. I know there are other Endgame books out there that are heavily touted, like 100 Endgames You Must Know, but Silman's Complete Endgame course, it's very, very thorough. I mean, he covers everything, and what's unique about it is that it's organized by rating, which you never see. What I mean by that is he says if you're rated, let's say, 1,000, or, you're class D, whatever it is, these are the endings that you should study first. If you're rated class B, these are the endings you should know. If you're rated class A. And that's very unique. You never really see that. You just see it by topic. So it's organized by rating, which is quite fascinating. Now, the only thing is, I will argue that you can't be too literal with that. Okay, there might be some things that are listed for a higher rated player that maybe a lower rated player should know, and vice versa, although this really applies more to the lower rating. So he organizes it very well. Just don't be too literal with that. But what's good about the way he organizes it by rating is that it's a good starting point, and it makes everything very organized, and it allows you to kind of cover the material that he feels you should know. He also makes it very interesting. Endgame study generally is very dry, can be very boring. Most Endgame books are very dry, so he at least makes it interesting. And as I said, it's all in there. Those of you who are my age may remember the old ragu spaghetti sauce commercial, right? Does it have basil? Yeah, it's in there. That was the catchphrase. It's in there. It's all in there. Same thing with this. He has all the basic mates, stalemate, king and pawn endings, minor piece endings, rook endings, queen endings. Everything's in there. And the prose, as with all of Silman's books, is very easy to understand. He's basically the Malcolm Gladwell of chess writing. Like, when you read a Malcolm Gladwell book, like something like Outliers, just the way he writes, it's just so clear and easy to understand. The prose just flows. Like, whenever I read Malcolm Gladwell, my first thought is, why can't everybody write like this? Well, that's what Silman is to chess. When I read Silman's books, I'm like, why can't everybody write like this? Now, to be fair, of course, there are other fantastic chess writers out there, absolutely. But some of these classic books, they're a little tough to read. But Silman put just as much attention to his writing as he did to the content, because that's a problem with some chess authors. They're so focused on the content that they don't want to invest any capital in their writing skills. But that's not an issue. Any book you pick up by Silman is going to be readable. So those are his 4 major works. I feel they're all essential texts. As you know, I'm going to say this again. People are going to throw rotten eggs at me because I say this so much, but The Amateur's Mind, I truly believe that is the most important instructional book. I do not consider anyone to be a serious improver if they haven't read it or if they have no intention of reading it. So I definitely urge you to check it out. If you're going to look at just one of the 4 books I mentioned, that's the one you should look at. All right, if you're only going to pick one, check out The Amateur's Mind. But Silman's work for club level players, for amateurs, for adult improvers is second to none. So what I'd like to do now is discuss some of his chess.com lessons, which are fantastic, and I'm guessing many people may not have checked these out, so I want to introduce you to them. That's coming up. So now I would like to quickly go through 7 of Silman's chess.com lessons. So what you do when you go on chess.com, you go to Learn and then Lessons, right? On the upper left, click Learn and then Lessons, right? Don't click Play and then Bullet Chess, okay? Stop playing Blitz. Take some time to do some of these Silman lessons. They're excellent. They're interactive. For those of you who are familiar with the chess.com lessons, they're interactive. I'm speaking about their lessons in general, not just Silman. They're interactive. You basically play the move on a board. You get feedback. Some of the chess.com lessons have a video component as well. But what's great is that when you play a move, you get a text message, or a text window, I should say, with an explanation of why it was correct or why it was incorrect. So it's almost like getting a private lesson, not quite, but it's close. I've been using these chess.com lessons for some time. They are fantastic. And I will say a lot of his content and a lot of his methodology, so to speak, his whole imbalances and all that stuff, that's in these as well. So if you're really not a book person and you want the next best thing, you can check out these lessons. They're also great because when you study on the go, which a lot of us do, obviously you really can't use a book. If you're waiting at the doctor's office, or you're waiting to pick up your child from a sporting event, or if you're on a break at work and you just want to do it on your phone, you know, those little breaks, 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, 15 minutes here, those add up. Obviously, you can't break out a book, but if you have your phone or your tablet, you can go on chess.com and do these, and it's the next best thing. So anyway, the first one is Silman Teaches Tactics. He shows you all sorts of tactical challenges from actual games. He says it's for players rated about 1,400 to 2,000 and beyond. Some are more difficult than others, but definitely check it out. It's Silman Teaches Tactics 1. There isn't a 2 that I could find. If I'm missing something, let me know, but I didn't see a 2. And I guess he kind of started it, but part 2 never happened. Anyway, moving on. We then have a 2-part lesson. It's 2 separate lessons. Silman's Lessons in Strategy, Part 1, and there's also a Part 2. And here is a direct application of his method of imbalances. He says some are very long. He's referring to the actual puzzles and the actual modules. He says some are very long, and experts and masters, USCF above 2,000, will not find many of these to be easy. A novice or intermediate level player below 1,800 will find these quite difficult, but they will learn a bit more with each attempt. And again, with these lessons, don't get frustrated if you get the wrong answer, because some people think the goal is to get it right every time. No, if you were getting these right every time, you're not learning. It's too simple for you. They're supposed to be difficult. That's where the learning comes in. That's what makes it challenging, and you go back. So it's Silman's Lessons in Strategy Part 1 and Part 2. He looks at a lot of master games. I think there's a few amateur games in there as well, but it's mostly grandmaster games. But he breaks it down. It's definitely a little more advanced, but it's very, very solid. So there's 2 parts of that, Silman's Lessons in Strategy. The next one, which is one of my favorites, it's also a bit difficult, but it's very, very good, is Roots of Positional Understanding. And basically, every single position, there's no tactics. He even says, are you ever at a loss for what to do when there are no immediate tactics available? If so, then this is the course for you. And he goes through all these positional ideas. It takes a bit of time. Some of them are difficult, but if you spend time on this, it's really going to help you. This is one of my favorites, Roots of Positional Understanding. Some of it is from master games. Some of them, I think, are composed, but it's all about how the pieces coordinate and finding ideas. Because remember, most positions, I mean, probably if we want to put a number on it, 80% of positions maybe don't have any immediate tactic in sight. So you need to come up with a plan. So this is a great application of some of his ideas from his books. The next course or lesson, similar to Roots of Positional Understanding, is called Now What, which basically means you've come out of the opening and now it's the middle game. So what's next? That's why he calls it Now What. So you've navigated the opening. Okay. Maybe you went by theory. Maybe you went by a memorized line, whatever it is. But we're now at that transition from the opening to the middle game, where maybe we're out of book. You got to kind of start to think on your own. What do you do? And it's all about how to analyze the position and come up with a plan. Again, all going back to his method of imbalances. So this is called Now What? Some of the challenges, because I've been doing this one recently, they're a little bit lengthy, the solutions, but he explains everything very well, and it's really, really nicely put together. So we have 2 more to go. The next one is Rook and Other Endgames. This is an outstanding module for rook and pawn endings and all of the major ideas involving rooks in the endgame. And let's face it, rook endgames are notoriously difficult, and they're also notoriously common. So this is a great, great endgame module. He also has a few minor piece things that he throws in there. So again, that's Rook and Other Endgames. It's absolutely fantastic. So in addition to his middle game stuff, which is most of what I've been talking about as far as his lessons, I mean, that's his main contribution, right? Other than the tactics one, most of his chess.com lessons are based on his middle game ideas, but this is a great endgame one. So Rook and Other Endgames. And then the last one, another one of my favorites, has to do with chess psychology, and it's called Mental Domination. And this is from the description. How do you get the opponent away from his or her plans and take over the game? IM Jeremy Silman knows that much has been made of psychology in chess, but there's not much out there about getting inside the opponent's head and controlling the pace of the game. So it's all about the psychological aspect, taking strategic control, understanding if a threat is real or imagined. And he looks at his own games and games from top players, and he has all these different themes that have to do with chess psychology. For example, the first one is called Refusing to be Obedient. The next one, Don't be a reacting robot, right? Because his whole thing is you have to be careful about simply reacting to your opponent's move. I mean, sometimes you have to, but his whole thing is a lot of times they'll make a move. You think it's a threat you have to react to, and it really isn't. And you have a winning move somewhere else on the board. He has one called Doing Your Thing, Not His, Demanding Play, Just Say No. He says no, you say yes. So it's all about the whole sort of head game and psychological aspect of the game. So once again, that is called Mental Domination. As a reminder, all of these chess.com lessons and all the books I mentioned are linked up in the show notes if you want to check them out. I'm not trying to overwhelm anybody. I'm not saying you need to run out and do all of these and get all the books. It's quite a bit of material, but it's there when you need it. Maybe start with one book or start with one course. Do what you can. I know we're busy. We have limited study time. That's kind of a theme of this podcast, but I just wanted to kind of put it out there. So maybe if rook endings are giving you some trouble, you can start with his Rook and Other Endgames course. If you haven't read The Amateur's Mind yet, because you want sort of a framework and a background in his thinking process and his imbalances, maybe you're not familiar with Silman, I would start with The Amateur's Mind. You'll get there, but I just wanted to kind of put it all out there. This episode is dedicated to IM Jeremy Silman. We mourn his passing. The chess world lost a great teacher, a great writer, and I just think his work is extremely valuable and his legacy will live on. So that will do it for our Season 6 premiere. Again, be sure to check out our Patreon page. If that's something you're interested in, you can become a member and get a few perks. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, we would love it if you would take a moment to give us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Many of you have already done so, and I am highly appreciative of that. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, I hope you win your next game.